Hey guys, so today I'm editing a photo of a young elephant I photographed in Mashatu Game Reserve in Botswana last year, November 2019. I was with a couple of guests of mine from Australia as well as the United States, and we had an awesome trip, saw incredible game viewing, went to Mala Mala and Mashatu, and this was a scene with a whole big herd of elephants on our first afternoon at Mashatu, and we were truly blessed. There's so much dust. It was really an awesome experience having them walk around the car. I took some cool GoPro footage as well. I'll share it at some stage. One thing that happened with the scene is that if you look at this little elephant over there, oh, it's a bit big, sorry, this little guy over there, it's not in focus in this photo, but he broke away from the herd, and when he did that, I noticed and took a photograph of him to isolate him on his own. So you see these are unedited, but he basically broke away and he ended up on his own like this. It's quite an interesting scene. You can see there's a couple of elephants in the background there. They're nicely not in focus, so they're not part of the image really, but it doesn't happen that often that young elephants, especially this young, have the confidence to completely move away from the herd and then quickly hustle back or get back to the herd. So it is interesting behavior, and I like the perspective of this young little elephant with these big trees. Even though they're not that big, the perspective, the size in comparison makes him look really small. Anyway, so we jumped into Lightroom. I'm in the develop module, and we're going to edit this photo and then take it into Photoshop and go through that as well. All right, so the photo looks pretty flat because I shot in the RAW format, so my camera is a Canon EOS R. I used the 7200 in this photo, and I shot in RAW. I always shoot in RAW and then post-process afterwards. That's a whole new debate, or a different debate, whether you should be or shouldn't be, but in my eyes it's a clear yes. You should be shooting in RAW and you should be editing, and it's a whole lot of fun if you can get into it and understand it, especially after your trips and reliving the moments. Right? We won't get into that too much. Once you jumped into Lightroom in the develop module, make sure your soft proofing is clicked. So people misuse this, or I don't like the way Lightroom set it up, but soft proofing basically changes the color profile of your histogram and of your editing to sRGB, which is pretty much the standard of color spaces when you're editing, as well as for printing labs. Most print labs like sRGB, so you have to end up converting to that anyway. So you might as well just edit in it, and then you don't have too many complications, right? So I edit by going from top to bottom. We do the lens corrections, then remove the chromatic aberration and the profile corrections. All right, so that's automatic, and we don't have to talk about that too much. Always just do them. I've never found a negative of using them. Then with the basic, we're going to go top to bottom. With our temperature slider, you can use this little eyedropper here on the elephant because it's supposed to be neutral and gray, but it just doesn't work too well. So it gives me a really green tint. I don't like that. And it's not about me liking it, I just don't think it's accurate. So I'm going to reset that, both of them. All right, and then I'm just going to say this custom one, I want it to be cloudy because it was a cloudy day, and that's what it set the color to. So remember, this is not a creative section of editing in Lightroom. It's not supposed to be your creative sliders. It's supposed to emulate the light that there was whilst you photographed this. So it's pretty accurate. It was quite nice and warm, and we'll move along. So the exposure slider, basically when I use this, I just slide it back and forth and see what I really like, and keep an eye on the histogram. So you see, as I move this to the right and to the left, it moves the histogram to the light, to the bright, see on this side of the histogram. And again, when I go to the darks, it's on this side of the histogram. So it's quite important to know where you are losing information. If it goes right up against this wall over here, ramps up there, it means you're losing information in the whites or in the brighter areas. And in this side, if you do it there, you're also going to be losing information in the blacks. This one's actually retained a lot of shadows, which is quite interesting. Anyway, double click to go to the middle, and I just work it like that. I'm quite happy. Let's say around about there. All right. Oh, maybe a little bit more. Okay, let's go there. All right, so that's my exposure. Then we'll do blacks. I hold in the Alt key, and that basically tells me where I'm losing detail. So under the elephant's belly, it's pretty dark. Happy to lose detail, then it's touching the histogram just on the side. The white's doing the same. Alt, just dragging, clicking and dragging. And I don't want to lose any detail on the whites. One of the reasons being, I don't like in the side, I don't have a sky or anything. I don't have a right to really lose detail. And I want to retain the detail on this edge here, so it can get quite bright there. Right, so we're happy with that. Contrast, this is where people get it wrong. Contrast is a mid-tone contrast in Lightroom, and basically what it means is the lighter grays and the darker grays get lighter and darker respectively. It's not true contrast. So you're much better off in all your images, practically all your images, taking your contrast slider to the left. Basically it makes the image all flat and dull, but it retains detail. It means you keep more detail. You can always create that contrast later, but you can't bring that detail back once you've lost it. So it almost acts like a shadows slider to an extent, but it just doesn't destruct the image. All right. And then we're going to up our shadows. You can take these quite high. I want to keep retaining detail on the elephant. We're going to darken this out again and dehaze a little bit. And then the highlights, you can use the Alt key. It will also show you where you're losing or where you're completely removing the blown out areas. In this case, I don't have too much. Just be careful with the highlight slider that you don't overdo it. All right. Now I'm going to jump down here to presence. This is our creative sliders. Be cautious with them. I don't use the texture. It's said to remove or increase detail without increasing noise. I haven't found much use for it just yet personally. And the clarity and the dehaze, just be cautious with them. Clarity, I'm not normally over about 14, and on the dehaze, I keep it under about 25 or so. So with this one, it's actually worked out pretty well, the dehaze, because there's quite a lot of dust in the sky from when the herd walked past us and when they were heading our way. And then saturation, this one, you can saturate a little bit here, but I prefer to do that within Photoshop. Let's leave our saturation at around 12 on this photo. All right, now I'm going to speed this up because this is something I go into in quite a lot of detail when I do one-on-one training, is our sharpening and noise removal. When I say sharpening, I mean I don't do any sharpening in Lightroom, and I do complete noise removal in Lightroom, so that when you editing to print photos, that you sharpen accurately and you enhance the details and not the noise, because it's unwanted detail. So I'm going to speed this up. I'll see you guys when we're in Lightroom. When I'm done with this, I'm just going to right click, edit in, and say edit in Adobe Photoshop. Sorry, what did I say? Lightroom. I'll see you in Photoshop. All right, so now we're in Photoshop. Just jumped in. This is my image, removed all the noise. And basically, my adjustment process is pretty simple. I use levels. So we go into adjustments, added a levels layer there. And it's a non-destructive process. I can switch these on and off. And my pixel layer right at the bottom there is unaffected. If I have to do pixel adjustments, sometimes I do, very seldom really, but I would just add another layer on top of that or duplicate the bottom layer, depending on what I want to do. All right, so when you double click on that, or just click on that, it opens up your properties and it shows you your histogram again. And this is where we make our adjustments. So good photos are very simply, there's good brights in them and good darks, and then the midtones, however you play them and however you want the photo to look. So one thing I do when I come into Photoshop, I take the midtones and the levels and I just play with it from the right to the left, right to the left, and I just see where I like the look of this photo. So I really like the background when I've brought these midtones down. I really do like that, but I feel like I need a little bit more shadows on that elephant itself. So what we'll do is I'm going to reset this, and we're going to bring this up holding an Alt. I want to bring the whites up nice. Don't want to overexpose on the elephant, as you can see there in that section there. If I right click, you can see there's a little bit of overexposing there, so we're not going to do too much of that. And again, on the blacks here, see on the tree and on the underside of the elephant, we're losing a bit of detail. So we won't do too much in that sense. And then on this midtones, we are going to bring them down substantially, because I like that. I think that looks really nice and soft. And then basically, we're going to keep this edit really, really simple, because I don't need to make too many adjustments. I do want to take a little bit of the midtone darkening off of this elephant. So basically, I'm going to use my brush, and by using my brush, I'm clicking the B key. Gives me a brush there, and then I'm going to toggle this. I've just clicked D now to make that black and white. You can also just click on that. If you want black, you can drag it all the way to the left. Say okay. And if you want white, you drag it off to the top left. So bottom left or top left. So I'm using a brush now, and when I use my brushes, sorry, give me 1 second, have to be on the mask. So you can't be on the adjustment layer itself, but on the mask you have to be toggled on it. See the little brackets there. I do use these Wacom tablets. Up to now I've been using my mouse, but I use these Wacom tablets for editing, especially the local adjustments. It's really simple, it's a cheap one, and it's got the Bluetooth. That's the only thing. You don't need the big one, you only need the small one. You only work in one little tiny little area. So it's like a tiny little area, it's almost like a little circle there. That's where I end up working. Anyway, so I'm going to use this to basically paint off and hide this layer off the little elephant. So in this case, all I'm going to do is hold in space, and I'm dragging across there. Then no matter what tool you're on, if you hold in space, you can move across your canvas. All right, so I've got the brush, Then I'm clicking the 5 on my keypad to set the opacity up top here to 50%. The mode is always normal. And then very importantly, if you Alt right click, it shows you your hardness, and my hardness is at 0. I don't want this brush to be hard at all. I want a really nice soft brush, and then I want it at 50%. I've just clicked X to switch my foreground and background colors. You see if I toggle there with X, and black hides the mask. So see, I'm losing a bit of detail here. We are going to add some really nice whites to this elephant, but just not yet. All right. So basically, I'm just going to go and paint this onto this elephant with a nice soft brush, clicking nice and hard to make sure it's nice and soft. And I'm not going to do it everywhere, but I don't want to have too much of this elephant darken. I want the elephant to stand out against the rest of the background. So you do have to paint this in really nicely. I'll speed this up and I'll see you now. So just make sure there's no spots that I've missed on that elephant. Over there, you'll see it does look a little bit odd. I'm going to alt click onto this mask to see where I've missed. There's a couple of spots here I've missed, and a couple of spots I've painted more black in than I needed to. But I'm just going to quickly go and shape that up a little bit. So paint in there, paint in there, paint in there, paint in there. I'm quite happy with that. It doesn't need to be perfect. It's so soft and it's subtle adjustments, right? If I click that on and off, you'll see the elephant itself isn't actually affected that much, right? Then basically now what I'm going to do, I'm going to speed this up again, but I'm going to paint in using the quick mask. So quickly focus carefully now. I click Q. Q, when I'm selected on this layer, puts me into quick mask mode. You know that by the top here it says quick mask. Also the layer that you're on goes green. Make sure your foreground color is set to black. Your mode is normal. Your opacity is 100. You can do that by clicking up top there, or just type in 100 on your keypad. All right. My brush is still a very soft brush. And then I'm going to paint in on this elephant. And what that does is I'm telling the Photoshop where I want the selection to be. So I'm going to make a mask and a selection by painting in here. I'm going to paint this elephant quickly. You'll see it makes this horrible green color. It's just great to tell you where. And it's really nice and soft, so you don't have to be absolutely precise. You can just be a little bit more relaxed, right? So now I'm going to paint this in and I'll be back with you in just a sec. Right, so you can see where I've painted in. I haven't gone right to the edge. I've used a very soft brush. So don't be too precise with this. You can always change a little bit, like I'll have to go fix it up at the foot later. I click Q again, or I can click this button there where you see it's indented. It takes me out of quick mask mode and it creates the selection that I want. Right. From the selection, I'm going to click adjustments and I'm going to make a levels layer again. Now you can see on this side here and down below, it's showing me, if I alt click onto the mask, it's showing me where I'm working. So obviously it's only making adjustments where there's white on the mask and the black, so none of the background is going to be affected. We're still going to get this nice dramatic look in the background, and we're just going to work on the elephant here. All right. It's quite important this to always go back and forth between your images, especially from your original, and see that it doesn't look too artificial. Personally, I couldn't care less what people think about my images as long as I love them, and as long as I enjoy doing it. I think that's the most important. Obviously, you have to take criticism well and be up for growth and open to growth. So that's why it's important to look at them again and keep looking at them again and have new eyes look at them and make sure you're not making silly mistakes and cheap looking mistakes in that sense. From an artistic perspective, as an artist, you can do whatever you like to do. Right? So we're going to create this by working on this mask now, just on the elephant, and there's a lot of space here in the whites that we can move, so we can really brighten that up. We don't want that to look too artificial, so we're not going to work on that too much. And then we can darken these midtones again a little bit, because obviously we reduced that in that side over there. And from the blacks perspective, we can't really do too much because this elephant's going to just lose too much detail. All right. So what we will do is that I'm going to paint, see there's a couple of areas where it's dark black, which I don't want to work, and some dark white. In these mid areas here, there are quite a few changes we can make. So I'm going to speed this up again, jumping back into quick mask by clicking Q. Brush is on 100%, quick mask up top there, it's green, and we're going to paint with a brush. And I'm just going to do this pretty rough. selected a couple of parts of the elephant, and I'm going to create another levels layer. Got more space to work on this side, and then now most importantly we've got space to work on in the blacks, and I really want to pump those up a little bit. I want to get some more detail on there, and then we're just going to work on this mid-tone and see what we can create, and lifting these up just a little bit more back into this one, and make some more plays on that second layer, and I'm going to click back here. So looking at this, looks a little bit rubbish, which is fine, it doesn't matter, we're going to fix it. So basically just knowing where we are, where there's let's say mixes in the detail here. All right, so on this one over here, we're just going to see, because there's a couple of areas that we missed on this which we're working at. So I'm going to take this, reset it again, and we're going to bring this up, but just not nearly as much as what we did earlier, so that we don't have it too changed. And then I'm going to take a brush. So I'm using white as the foreground color. I'm going to work on the mask again, and I'm just going to put the opacity at 50%. I just want to fill in some of these gaps so I can paint in on here. So X, make sure my foreground color is set to white, and all I'm going to do here is that I'm going to paint in these gaps here with this little light gray. That makes sense. Over there, and that's pretty much all changes we really need to make. So you can't really see what I've done there, but if I toggle that on and off, it's filled that in quite nicely, so it doesn't look so artificial anymore. Right, so if I go back now, I'm pretty happy with what we've created there. I think it makes that elephant stand out without having made too much of a change, and really just gives a bit of contrast versus the background there. One thing you can do, which is quite sneaky, is I've just control-clicked on that mask over there, the middle one, because that's the whole elephant. I'm going to add a new layer. So I've made a new levels layer. And all I'm going to do is, once I'm selected on that, I'm going to say Control I. And when I do that, it's inverted the mask. So now it's created a white on the background, black on the elephant. And all I'm going to do now is that I'm going to basically say, I want this layer to reduce the whites. So basically what it means is the whites on this layer are not true whites, and the blacks on this layer are not true blacks. So I'm going to pull that in a little bit, so it makes the whites lighter and the blacks, or the whites, grayer and the blacks whiter. So it creates this hazy effect. I don't know if you can see that, but the haze is not on the elephant. So it does create this little bit of depth in there. I don't need to do it too much. We don't have to do it too much, but I do quite like it. It's an overused technique, but I do quite like it to create a little bit more of a dramatic feel and to draw you to the subject here. So I don't think that looks artificial. I think it looks pretty neat. It's open for discussion whether or not you think that looks better or that looks better. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And then we're going to go from here and add some mid-tone contrast, something we spoke about earlier. So to add the mid-tone contrast, pretty simple. All I've got to do is add an adjustment layer, levels, right? I'm going to type here mid-tone contrast. And there you've added mid-tone contrast. I'm just kidding, it's not how it works. Anyway, it just knows which layer it is, so if I need to make adjustments. All I'm going to do here is I'm going to say that in the blending mode over there, I'm going to put it at soft light. So it creates that, it's just how the layer works. And all I'll do there is reduce the opacity because it's looks really poor. And I'll put that at 20% and then see what it's come to. So you toggle that on and off. I think that's quite nice. I just want to toggle that off. See, I don't like that too much, this layer. So I'm going to go and make another adjustment here. I think we can put the blacks back a little bit, and I think that's a little bit better. All right, it's not so dramatic. Maybe those whites a little bit. Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. Anyway, this is basically where we've come to, and it's pretty much the final image. When I edit, I do take a lot of time. Sometimes I go back into images and make new adjustments, but this way you can come and do that. You can come and work on the layers and you can see what you like and what you don't like. If I look carefully at this elephant, I might add a little bit more light underneath there, underneath its chin. See there, and on the trunk, we can add a little bit of contrast, and even maybe there on the belly section, just make it match the whiter areas of the rest of the elephant. See? All right, so from here, basically, I'm just going to click Control S, which is going to save it. You can also click File, Save, and that will save it next to your original photo in Lightroom, and it'll open up this PSD here, which is the photo that we just edited. So you know where it is and it comes up next to your file in Lightroom. And then from there, I say flatten image, and then I do all my sharpening depending on which platform. But I don't save final JPEGs, I don't keep them. Just save the photo, save the PSD, do your sharpening on the size that you need for print or whichever platform you're using, and then you can delete the JPEG and just keep the the edited PSD file. So that's pretty much it for this little elephant. Simple photo, really basic, trying to keep it nice and clean. And I think it's a cool perspective on where it was, and asks a bit of questions about the photograph. So if you have any questions about this, please feel free to get in touch.